Imagine standing in a Roman battle line. You are disciplined, trained, armed from head to toe. You have fought barbarians before. You know how this works. Then you see them. No armor, no tunics, no shields in some accounts, just men, painted, screaming, gold torques gleaming around their necks, charging straight at you across an open field, and they are not afraid. That's the part that breaks you. Not the nudity, not even the screaming. It's that they look at your wall of iron and they smile. Who were these men? Why did they strip naked before battle? And did it actually work? The answer might change how you think about fear itself. The year is 225 BC. The Roman Republic is not yet an empire, but it is hungry, expanding, pushing north, absorbing the fertile plains of the Po Valley in what is now northern Italy. The Celts who lived there, the Boii, the Insubres, the Taurisci, watched Roman settlements creep closer to their lands year by year. They had fought Rome before. They had even sacked the city itself back in 390 BC, a wound Romans never forgot and never forgave. But now the balance of power had shifted. Rome was stronger, more organized, more relentless. So the northern Celts did something extraordinary. They sent messengers across the Alps, deep into Gaul, into the regions the Romans called Transalpine Gaul, modern France, and possibly as far as what is now southern Germany and Switzerland. They were calling for help, but not from just any warriors. They were calling for the Gaesatai. The name itself tells us something. The Greek historian Polybius, writing in the 2nd century BC, is our most important source on these warriors, and he gives us the word Gaesatai, which most scholars believe derives from the Gaulish word gaisos, meaning spear or javelin. So in one interpretation, they were simply the spearmen. But Polybius describes them differently from ordinary spear-carrying soldiers. He describes them as mercenaries, wanderers, warriors who sold their service, not for land, not for tribal loyalty, but for gold and the chance to fight. This is the first strange detail. In a world built on tribal bonds, where you fought for your king, your clan, your cattle, these men had stepped outside that system entirely. They were professionals of violence, freelancers of war, and the northern Italian tribes paid them handsomely to cross the Alps and face Rome. Their leaders, according to Polybius, were two kings, or chieftains, the translation is debated, named Concolatenus and Aneroestus, two leaders commanding one force. Even this detail is unusual. Celtic armies often had a single supreme commander. Having two suggests either a coalition, a power-sharing arrangement, or perhaps two separate bands of Gaesatai who agreed to fight together for this one campaign. We don't know for certain. What we know is that they came south. They were paid well, and they were considered the most fearsome warriors in the combined Celtic force. The army that assembled was massive. Polybius gives us numbers, and ancient numbers should always be treated with some skepticism, since ancient historians often inflated figures for dramatic effect. But he claims the combined Celtic force numbered somewhere around 50,000 infantry and 20,000 cavalry and chariots. Whether or not those exact figures are accurate, Roman sources make clear this was a serious threat. Serious enough that Rome declared a state of emergency. Serious enough that they called up emergency levies and negotiated alliances with other Italian peoples. The consul, Gaius Atilius Regulus, was recalled from Sardinia. A second consular army marched north under Lucius Aemilius Pappus. Rome was genuinely frightened. And then came the battle. Or rather, first came the march. The Celtic army swept through Etruria, the region of modern Tuscany, plundering as it went. They weren't just raiding, they were making a statement. They were demonstrating that Rome could not protect its allies, that the price of alliance with Rome was vulnerability. This was psychological warfare before the battle even began. But the psychological masterstroke was still to come. At the Battle of Telamon, fought somewhere in coastal Etruria, possibly near modern Talamone in Tuscany, in 225 BC, the two Roman armies finally converged on the Celtic force from two directions. The Celts were caught between them. This was a serious tactical problem, and the Celtic commanders responded with a serious tactical decision. They arranged their forces with the Italian Celtic tribes, the Insubres and the Boii, facing one direction, toward one Roman army, and they placed the Celts facing the other direction, toward the approaching forces of the consul Attilius. And then the Celts took off their clothes. Polybius describes this directly. He says they stripped to fight, keeping only their weapons and their golden ornaments, their torques, their armlets, their neck rings. They stood in the front rank of the Celtic army, naked against the autumn sky, and they waited for Rome to come to them. Why? This is the question that has fascinated historians for 2,000 years, and the honest answer is that we have several theories and no absolute certainty. Polybius himself offers one explanation, a practical one. He says the ground was covered with brambles and undergrowth, and that clothing would catch and restrict movement. This interpretation makes the nudity tactical rather than ritual. It's the explanation of a practical Greek military historian who perhaps found the religious explanations distasteful or simply less interesting than logistics. But most scholars today think Polybius is either wrong or only partially right. Because the Celts didn't just fight naked here. There are suggestions in the ancient record that this was a pattern, a practice, something associated with this particular group across multiple encounters, and brambles don't explain gold torques. If you're stripping for mobility, you don't keep heavy gold jewelry around your neck. The ornaments suggest this was a display, a ritual, a statement, Celtic religious belief, as best as we can reconstruct it from fragmentary sources. And we must be careful here, because the Celts left no written religious texts of their own, and much of what we know comes from Roman and Greek observers who had their own biases. Celtic belief appears to have included a concept of the body as a kind of sacred armor in itself. The warrior who stripped naked was not exposing himself to danger. In his own understanding, he was encasing himself in something more powerful than iron. He was placing himself under divine protection. The gods, or whatever powers the Celts believed in, would shield the naked body that iron could not enter. There is also the matter of what the Greeks and Romans called furor, a battle frenzy, a state of controlled madness that certain Celtic warriors were said to enter before and during combat. The Romans found this terrifying and fascinating in equal measure. The naked body, the wild hair. Celtic men were known for using lime to whiten and stiffen their hair, creating an effect ancient sources compare to a horse's mane. The screaming, the gold, the complete apparent absence of fear. These were all components of a psychological package designed to do one very specific thing. Make you believe, just for a moment, that the thing running at you was not entirely human. Polybius says it worked. He records that the Roman troops were shaken. Disciplined, experienced soldiers who had fought many enemies, they were disturbed by what they saw. There is something deeply unsettling at a primal level about an enemy who does not behave according to the rules. Roman warfare was, in many ways, a system of controlled violence with understood protocols. You advanced in formation, you protected yourself, you valued your life. An enemy who stripped naked and charged screaming was rejecting all of those protocols simultaneously. It sent a message that could not be ignored. These men are not playing by any rules, you understand. But Polybius, to his credit, does not stop there. He also records what happened next, and what happened next is a brutal corrective to the mythology. The Celts were positioned in the front rank, and when the Roman artillery, the pila, the heavy javelins, began to fly, the naked men had no shields or only small ones, and no armor. Polybius describes them breaking before the javelin assault, falling back in disorder, disrupting the ranks behind them, Their bodies, which their beliefs told them were protected by divine power, were in fact completely exposed to iron. And iron, as it turned out, did not share their religious convictions. The Battle of Telamon was a Roman victory, a significant one. The consul Attilius Regulus was killed, hit by a javelin during the fighting, one of the relatively few Roman consuls to die in personal combat during this period. But his army held, and when the second consular force arrived, the Celtic army was caught from both sides and destroyed. Polybius records massive casualties. The chieftain Concolitanus was captured. Aneroestus fled the field and reportedly died by suicide. The ancient sources say he killed himself to avoid capture, which itself tells you something about the values of these warriors. Capture was a humiliation worse than death. The question that hangs over all of this is what the Battle of Telamon actually proved. And the answer is complicated. It did not prove that the Gaisatae were irrational or suicidal. Naked warriors in the ancient world were not unique to the Celts. There are accounts of certain Germanic warriors, certain Greek groups, certain peoples across the ancient world who fought partially or fully unarmored, sometimes for religious reasons, sometimes to demonstrate contempt for the enemy, sometimes because armor was simply unavailable or unaffordable. The Gaisatae occupied a specific cultural and professional role. They were the shock troops of psychological warfare, designed for the moment when you need to break an enemy's nerve before the real fighting begins. The evidence suggests that in many encounters, it worked. We know the Gaisatae or similar groups appear in accounts of other Celtic conflicts with Rome, and the pattern of Roman reaction, the fear, the disturbance, the need to specifically record and explain these warriors, tells us that the psychological effect was real and repeated. You do not write about something at length, as Polybius does, unless it genuinely disturbed you or your sources. The naked charge was not just a curiosity, it was a weapon. What failed at Telamon was not the psychology, but the physics. Once you survive the initial charge, once the first wave of terror passes and your training takes over, a naked man is easier to kill than an armored one. The javelin volley that broke the Gaisatae was not a failure of Roman nerve. It was Roman tactical intelligence. Someone in the Roman command structure recognized that the way to defeat psychological warfare was to neutralize it from a distance before it could close with your men. Don't let them get close enough to make eye contact. Don't give their fear magic time to work. Kill them with iron at 40 meters. This is perhaps the most important thing about the Gaisatae, viewed across the full sweep of history. They represent a sophisticated understanding of the human mind in warfare. The Romans later codified this knowledge. Their military manuals discuss the importance of maintaining orders in the face of terrifying enemies, the importance of not letting soldiers dwell on fear. But the Celts understood it intuitively, and they weaponized it long before anyone was writing such things down. The Gaisatae disappear from the historical record after a certain point. The Roman conquest of northern Italy in the decades following Telamon, completed by around 190 BC, eliminated the political structures that had hired and sustained them. The Celtic tribes of the Po Valley were absorbed into the Roman world, their warriors eventually becoming Roman soldiers themselves. The specific mercenary tradition that the Gaisatae represented had no more patrons, but their echo is present in every subsequent chapter of Celtic-Roman warfare. When Vercingetorix rallied the Gauls against Julius Caesar in 52 BC, 3 generations later, the warriors of Gaul still fought with a ferocity that Caesar respected and feared. When the Britons faced Roman invasion under Claudius, and later fought the desperate revolt of Boudicca in 60 AD, Roman sources still found themselves reaching for the same language, the wildness, the courage that defied explanation, the willingness to die that Romans found both admirable and incomprehensible. The ghost of the Gaisatae ran through all of it. What do we make of them standing here 2,200 years later? There is a version of their story that is purely romantic. The noble savage, the free warrior unconstrained by civilization's fear of death, choosing glory over safety. Ancient sources sometimes tell that story, and it is seductive, but it is also probably wrong, or at least incomplete. The Celts were not reckless. They were professionals. The nudity was not chaos. It was a calculated choice made within a coherent belief system. They had a theory of warfare, and it was not naive. It recognized something that every modern military psychologist would confirm, that the battle is won or lost in the mind before a single blow is struck. Were they fearless, or were they afraid and chose to stand anyway? The honest answer is, we don't know. The inner lives of the Celts are not available to us. Polybius tells us what they looked like from the outside, terrifying, magnificent, and ultimately mortal. He cannot tell us what they felt. Perhaps that is the right place to end. Because what the Celts understood, and what their destruction at Telamon confirmed in the most brutal possible way, is that courage and invulnerability are not the same thing. A man can walk naked into the worst that the world can offer him, sustained by belief that his body cannot be broken, and be wrong about the invulnerability while being absolutely right about the courage. They stripped away everything: armor, clothing, the visible signs of protection, to show their enemies, and perhaps themselves, that there was something inside that could not be stripped away. Whether that something was divine protection or sheer human will, the Romans who faced them at Telamon never quite forgot it. And neither, if we are honest, should we.